This is the An-225 Mriya, a true aviation dream. It is the largest aircraft ever built in human history. Its original purpose was to transport the Soviet Buran space shuttle. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the aircraft ended up in Ukraine. Antonov Design Bureau invested $20 million to convert it into a commercial cargo plane. The An-225 has set more than 240 world records in aviation. Its specifications are nothing short of terrifying. Its size is massive, 84 meters in length, with a wingspan of 88 meters. It stands 18 meters tall, roughly a 6-story building. It is powered by 6 ZMKB Progress D-18T turbofan engines, the most powerful engines ever built in the USSR. Each engine produces as much power as 400 passenger cars combined. Together, they generate 140 tons of thrust. Its maximum takeoff weight reaches 640 tons. It holds a cargo record at an incredible 25,382 tons. Its cargo bay is 84 meters wide and 43,535 meters long. That's longer than the Wright brothers' first flight. It can easily fit 80 cars inside, or even an entire Boeing 737, minus the wings. This monstrous engineering marvel was built only once. That makes it even more precious. It attracted aviation enthusiasts who travel the world to see the An-225, just for a glimpse of its majestic form. Sadly, the only An-225 ever built was destroyed in the Battle of Antonov Airport during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, ending its journey in history. But in November last year, Antonov Design Bureau announced a plan to rebuild the An-225. So in the future, we might once again witness this giant in the skies, soaring freely above the earth. Welcome to Chris's military base. Today, we'll talk about the legend of the An-225 Mriya. After World War II, the Soviet Union decided to establish its primary strategic airlift industry in Ukraine. In 1946, centered around Oleg Antonov, the Antonov Design Bureau was founded in Kyiv to support Soviet needs for long-range transport of heavy military equipment and logistics. Their goal to solve this logistical challenge. In 1956, the US introduced the Lockheed C-130 into service. To keep up with American progress, Antonov began developing the An-22, and the An-22 soon became the largest turboprop aircraft ever built, a world record holder at the time. But just a few years after entering service, its reign was cut short as the US rolled out the C-5 Galaxy strategic airlifter. This greatly alarmed the Soviet military because in a large-scale war, their current transport fleet still could not rival the Americans. So in 1972, the Soviet government ordered Antonov to design a transport aircraft even larger than the C-5, and it had to outperform the C-5 in every possible way. After 10 years of development, the An-124 was born. With a payload capacity of up to 150 tons, it became the largest aircraft in the world at that time. And once again, the Soviets reclaimed the top spot. At the height of the Cold War, the competition between the two superpowers extended beyond the skies. It raged on in outer space, too. The USSR was the first to send humans into space, while the Americans were the first to land on the moon. In the 1960s, the Soviet Union learned that. The US announced plans to develop a reusable space shuttle. Initially, the Soviets paid little attention. They were busy constructing a space station of their own. They even proposed building a base on the moon. But by 1975, Soviet authorities believed the American shuttle program might be intended for military purposes. The Orbiter Command could carry laser weapons into low Earth orbit. It would allow the US to develop space-based weapons faster. As a result, the Soviets secretly began developing their own shuttle, the Buran program. In 1981, the US successfully launched the Columbia shuttle. Then President Reagan announced the Strategic Defense Initiative in 1983. My fellow Americans, thank you for sharing your time with me tonight. The subject I want to discuss with you, peace and national security, is both timely and important. In this televised address, President Reagan introduced a bold plan. To counter the Soviet nuclear threat, the US would build a space-based laser defense system to neutralize Soviet nuclear capabilities. This enraged Soviet leaders, who demanded the immediate acceleration of the Buran shuttle program. The Americans modified a Boeing 747 to transport their space shuttle. Oversized components were shipped by sea to the Kennedy Space Center. The Soviets had no such option. Their launch site was inland, making sea transport impossible. Buran components were too large. For overland transport, air transport was the only solution. At the time, the Soviets hastily modified several bombers to carry Buran components. But unlike the American shuttle, the Buran had no engines of its own. All thrust came from the Energia rocket. The rocket's main booster was over 60 meters tall to transport the core stages. They needed an even larger aircraft. Their eyes turned to the largest aircraft in the world at the time, the An-124. But even the An-124 wasn't large enough for the mission. Engineers had no choice but to modify it. They extended the An-124's fuselage fore and aft of the wings, added 2 more D-18T engines for greater thrust, and reinforced the fuselage with mounting points to allow it to carry the Buran on its back. But carrying such a massive load disrupted the aircraft's aerodynamics. Wind tunnel tests revealed the tail fin lost control. The aircraft became unmanageable. To solve this, engineers redesigned the tail with twin vertical stabilizers. They installed 2 massive tail fins, allowing airflow to pass between them. To ensure both fins operated in sync, engineers installed 2 electronically linked hydraulic systems, sans moniteur de fin position, to keep them synchronized during flight. This ensured the horizontal and vertical stabilizers worked together in perfect coordination. The landing gear was also upgraded. The front gear now had 2 struts, each with 2 wheels. The rear landing gear had 14 wheels. This allowed the aircraft's weight to be distributed across 32 wheels in total. It was also equipped with advanced oleopneumatic suspension to absorb impact during landing. The last 4 rows of the main landing gear were mounted on swiveling bogies, giving the giant aircraft a surprisingly tight turning radius. This made it more maneuverable and capable of turning around on a 60-meter wide runway. The size of the An-225 was astonishing. When placed alongside the Boeing 747 C-5 Galaxy and An-124, you could clearly feel just how enormous its 88-meter wingspan truly was. To ensure such long wings remained stable in flight and would not suffer structural failure, engineers reinforced the wing's internal structure. Beneath the aluminum skin was a precisely organized framework of ribs and transverse elements forming the wing skeleton. For large reinforcement, spars ran through the wings, extending from both sides toward the center. This reduced the stress on the wing-toe fuselage joints and distributed the immense lift force as evenly as possible throughout the entire wing. On November 30th, 1988, the first prototype was completed at the Kyiv Aviation plant. On December 21st, the An-225 made its public debut. It happened to be a snowy day, and the all-white An-225 looked like a polar bear gliding across the ice. It began taxiing, preparing for takeoff. But the engineers on the ground were deeply anxious, worried it might not get airborne. Fortunately, the An-225 lifted off smoothly and gracefully. It soared into the clouds. That maiden flight alone set 106 world records. 1 year later, the An-225, carrying the Buran shuttle, appeared at the Paris Air Show, where the Western world witnessed the majesty of this white giant. Its presence made every other aircraft look insignificant in comparison. The An-225 even flew through a thunderstorm with Buran on its back, shocking Western media outlets. Although it dominated the air show, outside of the spotlight, the Soviet Union was already in decline, teetering on the brink of collapse. The government had no intention of continuing the space shuttle program. The Buran project was soon abandoned. In 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved. The An-225 was returned to its birthplace, stored on the outskirts of Kyiv, Ukraine. It sat there idle for 7 full years. Over time, it was cannibalized. 4 spare parts to support the An-124 fleet. The aircraft was stripped down beyond recognition. During those 7 years, Antonov Design Bureau, Antonov continued operating its fleet of An-124s for commercial cargo transport to earn some revenue. But not all contracts could be handled by the An-124, so they decided to bring the An-225 back to life. They invested $20 million to restore the An-225. Its engines were replaced, new avionics were installed, and the cargo floor was reinforced to carry heavy loads. In 2001, in Kyiv, at the opening ceremony of Boryspil Airport's new runway, the An-225 made its return. The world once again witnessed this sleeping giant. On September 11th, at the Paris Air Show, the An-225 broke 124 new world records in a single flight. But another event that day completely overshadowed the An-225. It was the 9/11 terrorist attacks in the United States. No one paid attention to the fact that the An-225 had just carried 75 T-80 tanks, weighing a total of 253 tons, to an altitude of 11,000 meters, cruising at a speed of 800 km/h. After 9/11, wars broke out in Afghanistan and Iraq. The An-225 received its first commercial contract since being restored. It was its comeback assignment. In January 2002, the An-225 delivered rations to the U.S. military base in Thumraid, Oman. It carried 7,375 pallets of field rations. That's equivalent to 216,000 individual meals. The total weight was around 188 tons. During the Iraq War, it took tremendous risks to transport gas turbines to the Baiji power plant in Iraq. In 2009, the aircraft received its iconic Ukrainian paint scheme, blue and yellow. It became a symbol of Ukraine on the world stage. The An-225 carried many extraordinary items, including 40-meter-long wind turbine blades and shipping containers. It even transported entire rail cars. These were tasks no other aircraft could perform. But with each mission, the greatest challenge for the crew was figuring out how to load these enormous items on board. When the An-225 was ready for loading, its 65-meter-wide nose cone would slowly lift upward, revealing the cargo bay. The front landing gear would retract forward, causing the aircraft to kneel down, making loading easier. 2 rear struts behind the front gear would extend, stabilizing the aircraft. Once lowered to its minimum height, the front landing gear would be suspended and bear no aircraft weight. Then, a massive folding ramp inside the cargo bay would unfold and extend outward from the aircraft. Several support struts had to be placed under the ramp to bear the load and stabilize the structure. Installing the support struts was labor-intensive. Workers had to crawl under the ramp and mount them one by one. Once the ramp was secured, the rail system was brought out. This part was also complicated. The rails had to be manually assembled, section by section, while ensuring perfect alignment and levelness. Once the rails were ready, orange-colored skids were mounted on top. These skids were connected to the winches inside the aircraft. They were used to pull the cargo into the bay. After everything was installed, it was time to bring out the cargo. The An-225 typically handled loads no other aircraft could carry, so the cargo was always massive. This time, it was a boiler weighing over 150 tons. Such a colossal item required 2 cranes to lift, and the 2 crane operators had to be perfectly synchronized to keep the cargo stable during transfer. The 150-ton container was gently lowered onto the skids, then secured and connected to the winch system. The winch was activated, pulling the load into the cargo bay centimeter by centimeter to ensure the steel cables wound evenly on the spool. 2 workers stood on wooden boards, pressing down on the cables to guide them precisely. Once the cargo was fully inside, the rail system had to be disassembled, and the cargo was secured tightly with steel chains. Once everything was complete, the ramp was retracted and the cargo bay doors closed. The entire loading process could take several hours. It was tedious, but that didn't stop customers from choosing the An-225 over its 20 years in commercial service. The An-225 carried trams, turbine blades, generators, even medical masks. Its final mission took place in February 2022, transporting COVID test kits from Tianjin to Denmark. After the mission, the An-225 returned to Antonov Airport in Ukraine. Following NATO's recommendations, the crew planned to evacuate on the morning of February 24th. But that very day, Russia invaded. The airport was one of their first targets. The Ukrainian authorities immediately issued a no-fly zone. During the ensuing Battle of Antonov Airport, the runway was rendered unusable, and the An-225 was destroyed in the crossfire. Aviation enthusiasts around the world mourned its loss. There was only one An-225 ever built. Now it was reduced to twisted metal. But back when it was originally constructed, the USSR had ordered 2 aircraft. The second one was only about 30 completed when the Soviet Union collapsed. In May last year, Ukrainian President Zelensky announced plans to finish the second An-225 to replace the destroyed one. Antonov Design Bureau also announced in November 2022 that the reconstruction project had officially begun. So in the future, we may still have a chance to see this giant soar through the skies once again. Looking across modern aviation history, the An-225 stands out as truly one of a kind. It is unique because only a single aircraft was ever built in this model. It is unique because it brought people together, regardless of nationality, regardless of politics, to simply admire the awe-inspiring power of this mechanical beast, to marvel at the shock and wonder of every takeoff. Modern aviation emphasizes economy and practicality. So in the future of aviation, we're unlikely to see aircraft of such massive scale again. Perhaps someday, the An-225 will remain only as a page in the textbooks, but it represents the largest aircraft mankind ever built, a pinnacle of mechanical beauty from an extraordinary era. That concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. Don't forget to follow and share. See you in the next video.